future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, welcome. It is Friday, June 24th, 2022, a dark day in American history. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. I am here once again with Amy Connect, and we are going to be breaking down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for the show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And look, everybody, don't let Paul Martino and his friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Level Field to launch a truly community-rooted PAC and invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmasking the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. And we need it now more than ever. We're putting a small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information to drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. That's ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Information on that is in today's show notes. Well, this week's show, look, everything just changed about 10 minutes before we went live the show, or before we were going to go live in the show. We had to sort it through. Supreme Court indeed just overturned Roe v. Wade, and we'll get into that. It's obviously going to dominate some of our discussions today, that's for sure. And in other horrific Supreme Court news, apparently we all must return to the Wild West, arming ourselves in public in case there's a call for a showdown, effectively turning all our main streets into OK corrals. Apparently Westerns are part of the American tradition in the Constitution in this new justice's dogma. And as you might imagine, shares of Smith & Wesson rose by more than 9% on Wall Street yesterday following the news. Of course, that means more gun sales, right? More guns flooding our streets. And we'll give a little update, what's happening here on the January 6 hearings. What do we make of them? Where is it going to take us? Some other news, according to a new report by the Education Data Initiative, in Pennsylvania, 661,000 student loan borrowers between the ages of 25 and 34 owe an average of more than $35,000 apiece. That's more than $23 billion collectively. And 35 to 49-year-olds owe an average of $46,377 each, or about $20.74 billion. Those between 50 and 61, an average of $46,929, and borrowers over 62 owe an average of $45,539. Yes, that's just in Pennsylvania, folks, but American student loan borrowers across the country owe more than $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. Yes, we are going to see major offensives on this all summer long. We saw protests from the Debt Collective in Washington, D.C., and now the Biden administration, their Department of Education, has agreed to cancel an additional $6 billion in student loan debt from more than 200,000 borrowers who were defrauded by their mostly for-profit colleges and universities. That is on top of the more than $25 billion in student loan debt the administration already canceled from more than 1.7 million borrowers. Now, supposedly, the Biden administration will decide by August 31st if it will make good on the Biden campaign's promise to cancel at least $10,000 in student loan debt across the board. We shall see. It looks like they are pledging more than anything else to make it difficult for people to figure out what is actually going to happen. So we shall see, because Democrats love to make things tricky and confusing and difficult, so that's what they're planning on doing. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Oh yeah, there's Kim Badillion. Kim Badillion is head of the Penridge GOP. Yep, she went all whack job on her kind of off the rails anti-LGBTQ crusade. Yep, taking to the papers and taking to email to basically kind of crusade against pride. How about that? Welcome to the 19th century. Let's go to 19th century. Although I think 19th century may have been a little bit more lenient, actually, on LGBTQ folks than Kim Badillion and her crew are. There was also a meeting in Penridge this week where they passed the new proposal going forward. We're probably not going to talk too much about that, but I just want to let you know there will be stuff coming forward. Just as we're going to show, my messages started like going off the hook. I don't know if you heard the beeps in the background. So some stuff organizing already happening, I think, in response to the Supreme Court decision and what's happened in Penridge. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, wherever you get your streams. Head on over to the ricksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast if you're not already. It should be flooding your streams, especially now. You can find it on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. I can't even get that out of my mouth. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And attention gamers, the Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store with friends of the show. They get everything for retro N64s, latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops. Look, follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's at The Game Inn on Twitter. If you've got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. So shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongAdayMan. That's with 2 N's, at SongAdayMan on Twitter. Look, folks, now more than ever, if we want a progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight and we need you. Become a patron for a good price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement, the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, Amy, welcome back to the show. How the hell are you?
Hi. I was doing better until this morning.
Until this morning, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's something. It's something.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't unexpected. I've been anticipating the SCOTUS decision, all week. They've been just releasing decisions left and right. I mean, I was expecting it. I would have been shocked if they had not overturned it, honestly. So, but yeah, it's definitely not something that I just, yeah. I'm still processing.
Yep, I hear you. We have got, let me see right now. There is 7 p.m. today, apparently. This is one of the notices that just came through on my messages. There's a protest for women's rights at 7 p.m. Today. This is Friday, June 24th, the corner of Main Street and Temple Ave in Sellersville. So if you're in the area, feel free to check that out. I hope it's okay to distribute that. I would hope so, since people want to come up.
There's also another one scheduled, I think, being scheduled for Doylestown for tonight by the courthouse at 6 p.m. And then there is another Bands Off Our Bodies rally. This one's a little bit farther. It's down in like Newtown, I think. It's at 5 p.m. It's at 1717 Langhorne, Newtown Road. Ashley Ahas is going to speak at that one.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. I know that that Kirsten had sent me the info on that too, to make sure we talked about that on the show today. That is, that's Friday. That is today at 5 p.m. 1717 Langhorne, Newtown Road. Featured speaker Ashley Ahas. Show up where you can today, folks. It's it is a freaking dark day. I mean, I don't know how else we put it. I mean, this is,
It is definitely a dark day. I mean, for the moment, I mean, nothing's going to change like right off the bat, right? Like Pennsylvania doesn't have any type of trigger laws or anything set into place. But I mean, it's not to say. I mean, we have a GOP run state legislature, so they've already. This is not something that it's just I don't even know. Like rambling this morning. It's just important. We have to get out to these protests to let our representatives know that, this is not going to be tolerated in Pennsylvania, right? Like Pennsylvania women are not going to be second-class citizens. No women in the United States should be second-class citizens. But here I live in Pennsylvania. We need to protect that. We also need to make sure that everybody gets out and remembers who they're voting for in November as well, because we have a choice between either Shapiro or Doug Mastriano, who is definitely going to reverse any type of protections for women, for abortion care, for reproductive care in the state.
100%. And I think if anybody has seen the latest polls on this, they are not encouraging. You've got Josh Shapiro's running about 44%, people saying to support him, and Mastriano is running about 40%. And that is within the polls margin of error. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I think the margin of error was 4.4% on that. So that's basically within the polls margin of error, with roughly 19 or maybe it's 16. Maybe I'm flipping that number in my head. Percent of people saying they had yet to be were undecided. And look, and then you also got Josh Shapiro's campaign and playing with fire. By basically spending money on ads that are basically kind of promoting Mastriano. We're promoting Mastriano for the primary, trying to pull a Clara McCaskill by saying, okay, I'm going to try to pick my opponent, the most extreme one possible, and run against them because, the Democratic consultant class believes that's the easiest one to beat. Forgetting that Doug Mastriano has got some deep roots here, and he's got foot soldiers. And so I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk at all. But I think that just what you said, Amy, is, there is no doubt if Doug Mastriano is elected, that Pennsylvania will become abortion will be illegal in Pennsylvania. Not
order. Even abortion. I mean, this is what people, I think some people don't understand, right? This isn't just affecting abortion. This isn't just affecting, whether or not I can make a decision to go to a clinic and end a pregnancy, right? This has to do with reproductive rights. This has to do with birth control. This has to do with hormone therapies. This has to do with a whole range of healthcare, different healthcare options and plans and factors, right? That when you deal, with women, right? Because we have a whole different system, and there's different things, right? Like it's how it is, and this is essentially going to be limiting access to proper care. I mean, in some states right now, you have, I think it's like in Texas, don't quote me, but they have like this law on the book that's going to go into effect like immediately, basically, that says like women, if you have a miscarriage, like you're liable to like be prosecuted. I mean, a miscarriage, something completely normal, right? That happens all the time. And it's just, and then like, so are you supposed to be afraid to go to the hospital because you're having a miscarriage? Like I don't know how this is going to work. I just feel like it's basically, it's putting these large blanket, like just controls over what you are allowed to do with internal things, right? This isn't like, man, I'm so irritated right now.
No, I hear you, but I mean, just like
it is. It's access. It's going to stop access. It's going to limit access for women on a whole host of range of things, right? Not just, like I said, abortion. A whole bunch of other options. I mean, Planned Parenthood, for one. I don't know how many teenage girls have used Planned Parenthood since its inception. I mean, I know I used it as a teenager. I know most of my friends got like birth control from there.
Yep.
They went and they would go to Planned Parenthood for your regular gynecological exams, like just different stuff, that wasn't necessarily available or that you could go to your regular doctor for. And this is going to destroy all of that. It's going to force women into back alleys, into back closets, and it's going to create an entirely new host of issues. Women are going to start dying.
Yep. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, I think and we have to be saying it, I think, that plainly. I mean, this is what we're talking about. I mean, and these are not, it's not just an abstract decision. I mean, this is your people's lives, women's lives are going to be destroyed and ended because of this decision.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no alternatives. Like, they're not saying we don't want abortion, so we're going to offer all of these other things. So, availability for contraceptives, information, sex education. Like, they're not offering any of that stuff. Like, they don't want any of that as well, right? Like, so there's no preventative measures other than basically just don't be a woman.
Right, and don't have sex, right? And don't have sex unless it's under the protection of a male, right, who was the head of the house. I mean, because this is really what it's all about, right? I mean, this is all about kind of white supremacist patriarchy. This is really what it is. It is about controlling women. Yeah. Like, it's controlling women's it's not just reproductive rights. It's like using the reproductive rights and control over bodies to control women at large. Because once you do that, you strapped in everything else, right? I mean, you've made everything subservient to men's control over women's bodies, period. Or the state's control over women's bodies now.
Yeah, and that's what it's going to end up being. It's going to be a state. It's going to be a state-controlled thing. So I'm really starting to, like, it makes me really wonder about all of these places, because how is this going to affect, I know another, like I said, Texas, again, they're starting to prosecute parents, right, of who have allowed their children to do, like, gender replacement or hormone therapy treatments and stuff like that and everything. So, like, let's just say that's gonna not happen here, right? Like, I see this just tumbling. I just see a downward spiral of a lot of civil rights being rolled back at the moment.
Yeah, and let's look at this. I mean, like what you have with the only reason why we don't have, restrictions on abortion in the state right now is because Tom Wolf vetoed every single bill that kind of went forward to his office. So you have one person has basically stood in the way of this moving forward. Right now, the other thing that's happening is that, look, the anti-abortion people are organized extraordinarily well, and they're well funded. So you can count on the fact that they are going to be showing up to the polls in the fall, right, for these midterm elections. And this is not just for the midterm in terms of what's happening at the federal level, although that's going to be important too as well, because, look, I think as soon as if the Democrats hold on to Congress, to hold on to the House, that's going to be a heavy lift. If they don't, there will be legislation that will be issued probably almost instant, like right at the beginning of the session for a federal ban on abortion. That would be my guess. But more importantly for us right now, like immediately, is that if those people turn out for election, and they will turn out for the election in the midterms, because those Republicans and the right wings in particular consistently turn out, that could turn, if you talk about 4-point margin right now, that could turn the governor's mansion, or that could increase the majority of the Republicans and right-wing Republicans so that they could override a veto. So, I mean, this is like, how much more critical can this election possibly be? Right? How much more critical can it be for us to organize and keep the eye on the freaking prize right now too as well? Enough of this bullshit kind of like, pecking at each other, right? For like whatever, because your issue is not perfect or something like this, and this issue is not perfect. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, we're at the point right now where we're watching the fall of the 20th century before our eyes. And, whatever, suck it up, get out and freaking vote. I don't know what the hell to tell you. I mean, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, because what you had said about having one person stand in the way. I mean, one person. That's not how this should be, right? I mean, it shouldn't. It's ridiculous. And it goes to show you how, like, the GOP, right? Like, they don't care what, it doesn't matter, like, what the majority of Americans want or what the majority of a particular group wants in a state. Like, they don't, it doesn't matter, right? Like, it's only about their agenda. And that's how this is being played out, like, across the entire country. I mean, and people, and see, the other thing too is, like, they're gearing up for 2024, right?
Yep.
They're gearing up for another presidential election, and all of this stuff is going to come into play, right? Like, I mean, can you even imagine if we were to get another president like Trump in there? And then, think about what could possibly happen to the rest of the Supreme Court. I mean, we only have, 3 liberal justices left on there. I mean, I don't think they're going anywhere, but the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if the entire dynamic of how our democratic processes work is just completely flipped on its head. I mean, it's already started.
Yep. Well, let me let's kind of take a look at just the reporting from the AP, just so that we get this on the record for here. So this is how the AP describes it, because look, there was a lot of kind of in the chattering class, right? I guess this, we're part of that in this show here, but I mean, a lot of the folks in commentaries, well, maybe Alito's going to soften this, or maybe the they're going to kind of do, it's not. So, and to Amy's point before, we're talking about the trigger laws. There are 13 states that currently have trigger laws that automatically just basically went into effect as of this decision, right? And those states are Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky, right? So they're there, all right? So here's how the AP reported this this morning. It says the Supreme Court has ended constitutional protections for abortions that had been in place nearly 50 years in a decision by its conservative majority to overturn Roe v. Wade. Friday's outcome is expected to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states. Half the states. The decision, unthinkable just a few years ago, was the culmination of decades of efforts by abortion opponents made possible and emboldened by an emboldened right side of the court that has been fortified by 3 appointees of former President Donald Trump. The ruling came as more than a month after a stunning leak of a draft opinion by Justice Samuel Alito indicating the court was prepared to take this momentous step. It put the court at odds with the majority of Americans who favored preserving Roe, according to opinion polls. Alito, in the final decision issued on Friday, wrote that Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the 1992 decision that reaffirmed the right to abortion, were wrong the day they were decided and must be overturned. Quote, "We therefore hold that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives," Alito wrote. "Authority to regulate abortion rests with the political branches, not the courts," Alito wrote. And there you go. It's pretty clear that this court decision, I'll fully admit, I have not fully read the final opinion, in part because, like I said, it was like, I think, when Amy got on this morning, it was like 9 minutes, right, before we first kind of got rolling that this news broke. But from the reporting that I've been able to skim, it looks like the decision is pretty close to what we saw in the leaked draft opinion from Alito.
Yeah, it sounds like I mean, that's basically what the draft opinion said. Was Alito was basically stating how oh my God, there's that word. how completely wrong that Roe was, and then Casey too on top of it. So I mean, I don't think he was going to soften his stance on it, especially. I'm a little surprised about Roberts, though. I'm not sure where he stood on this. I haven't looked at the paperwork yet or anything like that on the decision. So I'm not really sure, but I would like to read I really am interested in reading the dissenting opinions.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, look, I mean, this shows, I mean, look, in my mind, I've grown decidedly less hopeful that information by itself will kind of break through and show people things, right? This kind of enlightened version of what knowledge does. But look, I mean, for those of us who are paying attention to politics on a fairly regular basis, I mean, this should rip off any last vestiges of belief that the Supreme Court is somehow above politics. I mean, the Supreme Court now is a 100% it's a captured institution by the right, and it is a political body, and they're going to continue to do this. The next decision, for example, that it's expected to drop, the next hugely momentous decision is supposed to be dropped is supposed to basically strip our ability to address climate change, right? Is basically to strip the administration away from environmental protection such that it's going to be virtually impossible to address climate through kind of executive action or through organizations like the EPA. I mean, it's just, this is that kind of libertarian future that people keep on saying, that they want, get the government out of it. It's never that. The government is never out of our lives. It's just a question of who is the government serving, what interest is it serving, and who is paying the price.
Exactly.
And look, you look at this ruling, and this is what it says in the AP report too as well. And this is something that has been reported on again and again and again. But why did I say white supremacist patriarchy? Well, here you go. Because the ruling is expected to disproportionately affect minority women who already face limited access to health care, according to statistics analyzed by the Associated Press, right? This will have a disproportionate effect on people of color, on the poor, right? Whether you're rural or urban, doesn't matter where the hell you are, you're screwed if you're a woman now, right? If you've got the means, you're going to be fine, right? This will be the return to that like Victorian, we're going to go traveling for the summer, where your kind of rich aunt will... Yeah, right. Your rich aunt will take you over to Europe, right, for a special kind of continental tour where you can kind of get things taken care of, and nobody needs to know. Jesus Christ. But
I don't think we can all I don't think we all have the ability to disappear for 9 months and magically reappear.
Right, exactly. And be like, oh, I was just visiting Paris, right? I mean...
and what you see, when you had pointed out, so when you had rattled off the states, right? So some of those states are Mississippi and Louisiana, right? Did I hear Louisiana in there?
Yep.
Yeah. So Mississippi and Louisiana have by far, and people should know this, the worst rankings in healthcare. Like they have the worst rankings out of all of our states for basically anything, right? Including education, healthcare services and stuff like that. So this is already going to impact in incredibly impoverished states already, right? And it's just going to make things even worse. Like I am so upset that this is happening. I mean, obviously for people, for me and for every woman everywhere, but for these women who are living in these states, right, who have no protections at the moment anyway, who are already living under incredible hardships, who don't already have access to things, and now this on top of it, I mean, so now you're also going to be looking at too, is you're going to be having women who are going to be punished. They are going to be punished.
Yep. Well, that's really what this is, right? I mean, this is really about bringing the draconian kind of, it really is, this is where you have, state violence. I mean, this is essentially like instituted, systematized, normalized state violence. Yeah. Directed, and it, you could dress it up in whatever kind of, pretend legal code that you can have. It is about the control of more than half of the population. And again, a punishment of those folks, particular people of color, women of color in particular, that this, I hate to put it this way, but this is one of the things I've had conversations with multiple people over the past couple months where I end up saying this, that well they're talking, especially like liberals who like to get into well, in the legal doctrines, they like to kind of abstract it. And I'm like, look, they keep on talking about rooted in American tradition, right? I mean, it's just a load of garbage, except, there is some truth to it, however, right? And they're like, well, see, even you, yeah, there's some, what the truth is? The truth is the American tradition is slavery, is genocide, is patriarchy, is hierarchy, is systematized sanction for, I don't know, goon squads going out and lynching people. That's American history. That's tradition in this culture. And so, yeah, the question, so that's the tradition that they're calling back to, that they're calling all of us back to. So really the question for us is not like, it's which traditions do you look to? Right? Because you know what? For every one of those traditions of like lynching people, there's the traditions of people standing up and organizing against that. Yep. To the assertion of, we have these rights too. We want to expand democracy. That is also an American tradition. So the question is not tradition versus non-tradition. It's which tradition are you going to choose to uphold? And that is precisely why this Supreme Court, we can see, is a clearly political body choosing to uphold the worst traditions of this country. I don't know how to say.
This is why education is so important, Kevin, because people don't know that. Yep. People don't know that. They only, especially when it comes to American history, they're only taught, a lot of times our children are only taught about the exceptional things that have happened. It's not really, everything bad is always just kind of downplayed, or it always justifies the end, right? Like there's always this way to justify whatever happened in the past, makes it okay. Everything now is like, makes that okay. And that's just not how it is in the least little bit. But that's where people get upset about, right? Because they will talk about that tradition of American exceptionalism, of democracy, and this and that. But I mean, the second you bring up, oh, well, that wasn't for everybody. There's always like, but it's not like that now, right? Like we fixed it all. I'm like, okay, so which tradition then are you looking at? Are you looking at the problem where like these people didn't have rights? Or are you looking at the tradition where they gained the rights, right? Where they stood up and they did that. I mean, if you look at the women's movement, are we looking at a tradition of 200, 300 some years of women not really having rights? Or are we looking at, the past 100 years or so where women have had some say, right, in what goes on in politics and stuff like that, and had a voice?
Yep.
So, I mean, you're right. I think that really definitely hits it on the nail. So when people talk about that, when they do talk about our traditions and our past.
Yeah, it's like, which, I always remember there was a time in my life, like even during my punk rock years, right? Which, in many ways I was, probably some of the more outwardly cynical times that I've had, right, when I'm thinking about kind of America, but inwardly hopeful, right? And what I mean by that is like, it's probably when I had the sharpest criticisms ever of this country, of capitalism. And, again, many of them I just carry with me now. I mean, they're just like, there's more books and background and history, that fills out the just, straight up rage of it. But even then, there was part of the hopefulness I always felt about this country, right, was that those traditions of people standing up and organizing and fighting back. And I think that the past, I don't know, let's just call it 5 years, 6 years for that matter, have slowly disabused me of any kind of remaining thought that kind of like everybody shares in these kind of, like we all hold those up as kind of like, it's only a small number of people who don't like that kind of like people organized to fight back and gain their rights. And, I think that I had always held this, in many cases, unconscious feeling that, that's part of what it means to grow up in this culture, is that even if you're, conservative for that matter, or even if you grow up in this culture, part of how your identity gets formed, right, through what we learn in our history and things, is that idea of that rebellious spirit, right? About the idea we're going to stand up to our injustices. And, as, MLK, famously said, the arc towards freedom is long, but the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And, I kind of bought into that progressive narrative, that, it's going to take the fight, and it's those people that are the motors that going, and I still believe all that stuff. But what has happened, for a variety of other reasons, we can't go into all of them now, but for a variety of reasons, what has happened is like, there's a solid group of people in this country who don't believe, don't buy into, and actually see that narrative as part of the enemy of their own personal lives. So that going into our schools, what we've been fighting here in school boards over and over again, right, is the idea that having education is a place where kids are going to learn and expand what they see and kind of run into things that are new to them, right? And having to grapple with the kind of these differences and different ways of thinking about stuff and kind of growing as a human being, that's being clamped down on. There are people that just want to control and limit the ability of human development, and to keep it in this little white, pristine, backward-looking worldview. And I think definitely underestimated the strength and the depth of those people. I'll say that now.
No, yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's it. Like, I had a thought and I lost it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, don't be.
I'm just a rambler.
I was thinking and I totally lost it.
Oh, God.
Fine. But what you're saying about the school, for school boards and stuff, that is important, right? We have, like, they talk about, we have, like, a declining enrollment issue up here in Palisades, and this wasn't in our show notes or anything, but they, that sometimes I get the feeling that sometimes some of the school board members and some of the community members are a little astounded as to why people wouldn't want to come up here, right? Well, I mean, other than the lack of housing, right? That's a big issue. But on top of that, I don't really feel like as if the curriculum, there's nothing really particularly wrong with the curriculum, but at the same point, it's not as inclusive as it probably could be. And I don't think that it's properly preparing our children for the real world, for people who want to move away from this area. Not everybody wants to stay in farm country, right? Not everybody's a farmer, and people want to move away, and children want to go to colleges. And I'll tell you something. I was in, I don't know how many college classes a few years back when I was doing community college at Bucks County, and I was in a lot of classes with students from Quakertown, with Penn Ridge, from Central Buck, like for this whole area, from Palisades. And they were, a lot of them, in a lot of their history classes, and a lot of, like, I'm going to say even, like, sociology classes, like all of these different, any type of classes that had to deal with society. These kids were, like, clueless. They're like, oh, we didn't learn that. Like, we weren't told that. Like,
Yep.
A lot of them just were, like, completely clueless, like I said, on to as actually how things work, right? How our government works, how our systems of democracy work, like all this stuff. Like, they have no idea. They were even unsure as of our own history. How are we supposed to make changes if this is the education that we're pushing out to our kids? It's supposed to give them just enough so they follow orders, right? Because that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. And, I've said this on the show before. I think that so much of this school board nonsense, so much of this, anti-DEI stuff, it almost feels like it comes down to the parents who have maybe racist or classist or like right-wing views about the world, don't want to be confronted by their own kids.
Yeah.
By saying that is something racist, mommy. Dad, like, you're a homophobe, right? And this is why. Did you know that? And I almost think it's like at that level, they just don't want to hear it. They want their kids to fall in line, and they want to do it by depriving them of alternative ways of seeing the world, right?
They are. They are, and that's what I've been seeing in Central Bucks. That's what I've been seeing in Penridge. This is what I've been a little bit in Palisades. Palisades is a bit off the rails. We're so small, but there has been that, right? Like we have our own Kim Badillion lady up here in Palisades. Anyway, and she puts out stuff like her messaging is all about like straight pride, right? Like she'll put that stuff up on her social media accounts. Yeah, like straight pride with like the typical pictures of like a 1950s white bride with the guy in the suit, and like it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
But that alone is
mentality. But that's the mentality.
Yeah.
Because that's for how long. Like I look back at some of these generations, and like this is like if I look back at some like my parents, right? Like my mom, my stepfather, and stuff like that, they were so entrenched in that, right? Like they were blue collar, working class, but it was all about that white patriarchal hierarchy. They lived within that, right? So when I started as a teenager, started like poking around at some of that stuff, it was met with like instant resistance. No, I was wrong. Oh, the schools are or they're being infiltrated and they're teaching wrong stuff. Like, so I don't think things have changed in that area. I just think it's getting worse.
Yeah.
It has gotten worse.
Well, and I think a lot of that goes to a lot of, what has motivated, this show, Raging Chicken, a lot of other, progressive work that's been going on in media stuff is basically pointing to the fact that, the big difference is the sheer amounts of money and systematic organizing kind of on the right being supported by legislation at the top, right? All that stuff going on. And, a Democratic Party that has moved further and further away from its working class roots to kind of embrace this kind of technocratic, professional, middle class way of being without an ideology. It's like, and I think all those things kind of have gotten us to this point, right? Mm-hmm. Because look, I remember being like in the 80s, like say growing up in the 80s and even the 70s, I don't remember that much about, but like the 80s is like, there were lots of racists around then too, right? And there were lots of freaking sexists over there too as well. Probably even more overt sexists then than there are now, right? And I say overt sexist, right? Meaning like, people felt was perfectly fine to kind of make overtly sexist comments to women like out in the open, and other people would be like, oh, good one, right? Whereas now there's a little bit less of that. Not that it doesn't exist, right? But, that kind of idea, right? So there was people there. The difference is that now those are organized groups doing that are well-funded and have training sessions about how to pull the levers of power, right? So you got the same assholes, right? Right? But now you've got like, you got trained monkeys now, right? Like now they've gone to school and they're taught how to bring their assholeness, right, to the seats of power in our communities. And that's like, I don't know. I hate to put it in those ways, but if the suit fits.
Well, and I look at it, I think it's part of a larger issue too. There was something that I found interesting. What was it, like last year, was the one school board candidate up here, Cora Landis, that she was running. She had posted something to her campaign page at one point about how she felt she was a minority, right, as a conservative Christian woman. And I looked into that a little bit, and I'll tell you something. So a lot of the backlash, I think, that we're experiencing now is because, our world has become more diverse. It has become more inclusive, like on a global scale, right? Globalization has definitely taken over. And our world, when you look at like complexions, has become darker, right? We have more intermingling. We have more intermarriages. We have people from different ethnic backgrounds associating with each other, meeting people, right? So you have this intermingling and you have relationships, and you have this explosion, I think, of globalization. And I think that's really scary for a lot of these people, right? Because they're afraid of it like impacting something about their life. I don't really know. I keep wondering like how all of this impacts people's lives and how it's affecting them, like how it's having a neighbor who is a married gay couple affecting you, is it because you don't want your children to see that? And like you really have to think about it. If that's really deep down, these people are uncomfortable with this type of stuff. They're uncomfortable with brown and black people. They're uncomfortable with alternative lifestyles, I guess, if you want to call that alternative. and it really comes back, they really need to take a look at themselves, because it really comes down to because if you're not okay, it is why are they not okay? Is it hurting them? Is it doing something detrimental? Most of the time, majority of the time, it's no, right? It's never anything like that. It's just people are uncomfortable, and they're either homophobic or they're racist, and they have to atone for that. They need to become accountable for that, and people don't want to do it. And I see this problem. I feel like the white group, as I want to call it, is being backed into a corner, or at least they feel like they're being backed into a corner. It's like this perceived threat, of globalization. I don't know if that made sense.
No, it totally does. But it's funny because it goes to this whole idea that, there's a thing on the Majority Report, for example, podcast I listen to regularly, right? There's always this back and forth about kind of like the zero sum game, right? There's always got to be winners and losers and things like this. And there's, Jamie, who used to be on the show kind of a while back, she and Sam Cedar, who's the main host, used to get in this back and forth all the time about does there need to be a zero sum game? And what Sam Cedar would always used to say would be yeah, look, that white guy, right, is going to lose something, right? And it's regardless of what is it. And what Jamie would always say is like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And they never quite got to this. What I used to be like screaming into the podcast thing, like, no, it's like, because I think they both were right about an aspect of that. And the way I always think about it is like this, is that like, look, that the white person only loses something if their identity is rooted in the fact that they are on top, right? And they must preserve the purity of their whiteness and those traditions. This is where this is white supremacy, like as deeply as possible, because you have to believe, for example, in genetics, that kind of you cannot dilute the white blood. Right? You have to, at somewhat core level, you have to believe that. You have to believe that whiteness is a specific culture that is superior to others, right? And that it must not be polluted. It's all rooted into the same kind of like discourse, in fascist discourse, basically, right? Mm-hmm. Because like I look at it like this, like with, and it took me a long time to understand that people who think that way, it's like this orthodoxy, right? So like if I was Christian, right, and my neighbor was Muslim, right, I could perceive that as a threat because it's different, right? That it acknowledges that there's someone else who believes it differently, right? And I could see it as a threat, so therefore I need to eliminate that threat to me being able to see only myself on TV, for example, right? I don't want them to be on TV. I want only myself to be on TV. But then the other thing is like, hey, I'm a Christian, you're a Muslim. I don't know a lot about Muslims. Hey, why don't you come over for kind of like a cookout, and I'd love to meet you, and kind of, and there's that opportunity for expansion, right? I mean, the opportunity for kind of like what I always thought was like the richness of democracy, right? Multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy, where you're learning from differences, right? That's what expands what we think. Right. But it's the only people who lose in this model, right? Because I gain something from that, right? I don't lose anything by expanding what I know about the world because someone else is different and doesn't share my experiences, right? Right. I might feel a little vulnerable because I'm unaware, right? But I can only expand. I'm a winner in that case. But in order to make myself a winner in that philosophy, I cannot be rooted in an orthodoxy about purity. Right? I can't. And so it's only those people who have this assumption that it's their way or the highway that lose anything. So really, what's the threat to them? The threat to them is that their way is not the only way. And they don't get to tell everybody else what to do. And if they're threatened by that, too fucking bad. I'm sorry. You will lose. Right?
Well, and that's why they call it like a perceived threat, right? Or like, because it's all your perception. It's not like somebody is actively like holding a gun to your head or holding a knife to you and being like, you have to do things this way. And,
right.
And it is very much how people view things. And it also too goes to like, so you'll have a lot of these people too, and they might be like you, right? Like just oh my gosh, this is cool. We've like this new person, like we should invite them over for a cookout, whatever. But then you also get that point where like, well, I'm not racist, right? Or I'm not homophobic or whatever, because they, you know, they've engaged, right? People engage, or they're nice, or they talk, or they have a friendship or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, but then when you start talking about like our government and about how like these systemic issues, that's when it becomes an issue. And they're like, well, that's not how it's really set up, right? So like you have these different levels too of this problem of like people, you know, realizing where they are in it, right? And like where their places, you know, are you exhibiting racist or homophobic behavior and stuff like that, these thoughts and everything else, you know? And if you're not, that's great. But like, if you can't understand that our system, our government institutions are completely like immune, like if you think they're immune to that stuff, which are designed by people who had these, you know, biases, and they haven't changed, like you know, in the institution, some of these go back like a really long time. So they haven't changed, and these biases haven't been taken out of those institutions. And that's what like really, I think that more than anything is what really gets me about these type of situations, right? Because you can work on people individually, like, right, like you can do that. But when you're dealing with these massive institutional just, you know, they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're concrete in our society, right? Like they're definitely like
systemic.
Wow, I can't think of the word this morning. You know, people, you have to be able to remove yourself from that, and you have to be able to understand that like I may not feel this way, right? But like these laws are definitely, they were put forth at a time when people felt differently, and they're not okay anymore. And like I don't know why that is such an issue, right? Because that's then where I think people feel like they're going to lose. That's when, like, as soon as the law gets changed or this policy gets changed, somehow they're going to lose something on top of it. When all that usually really is what happened is you just include people. That's all it is. It's usually what it is. And generally, on a day-to-day basis, you are not losing a single thing at all.
No, and it's like I you know, Rick Smith always used to say this. Like he's like, you know, he would say or still does say this. Not always used to, but he always says this. He's like, I just never understood when you have these people, and he's, you know, he runs it. You know, he runs into people all the time, and he have these conversations to people. Like I don't have the patience for it. He does, but he's like, you know, somebody was talking about doesn't want to have gay marriage because, right, it's gonna infringe upon the sanctity of his marriage. Right. And then, you know, Rick's is like, how does like that guy marrying that guy, right, have anything to do with you? Right. It's like, what is that? How does like those people, those two women, right, kind of like falling in love with one another and getting married, how does that have anything to do with your marriage? Right. You know, it's like, it makes it like you just the very basic level, like, what does it do? I mean, so just like you said, it's like an including, oh, more people have kind of access to this thing, like two people who love each other and that kind of, they want to make a commitment to one another, right? And enter into this particular form of a relationship. Okay, great. Okay, fine. How does that affect me? It really doesn't, right? You know, if at a baseline, like my marriage with my wife, like how does that affect? It doesn't, right? It doesn't. I mean, everything that was there before the law change is there after the law change, right? There's nothing taken away from me, right? It's only in like, you know, this perceived thing, or in the preservation of one particular way of doing. And this is why I think like this, I mean, I'm not trying to force it back to the Supreme Court stuff, but this is why I think the Supreme Court stuff is so dangerous, right? Because what it does is it basically says from the top, right, we are going to force a particular vision of how people's lives should be ordered on everybody, right? And that's going to be the baseline. And, you know, and I think, and I pair that with that other decision that they made this week about, you know, basically saying, hey, you got the right to kind of like, you know, carry guns wherever you want.
Yeah, right? They, you know, they were even talking about that within DC, right? Like I guess that's the answer. That's always their answer. We have such a gun issue in our country, and their answer is to fix it with more firepower.
Yep. Yep.
That's like throwing fire on fire. Like, it's not going to work.
No, and it's like, and they basically said, well, hey, all you states that restrict like the carrying of kind of handguns or carrying of weapons like in the streets of your cities, all of you who've put a law against that stuff, that's unconstitutional. So you got to go back and fix those. And so now,
you wait though. You wait, Kevin. They're gonna backtrack on that. You wait, because the second there's non-white people with guns, it's always a problem, right?
Yep.
Always.
Well, that's where the first major gun restrictions came from, right? Mm-hmm. Is the Black Panthers decided, like, you know what? we're gonna go out and watch the cops, right? And we're gonna make sure that those people don't get beat up, and we're gonna have our long arms, right? We're gonna have our long guns with us, openly displayed as we're legally allowed to do, and then that's when the first restrictions on those kind of carries happen. Right now, of course, I
don't know how they're supposed to explain this to a city like Philadelphia, which is having such a huge issue with crime and gun violence. And now you're just being like, okay, so now it's okay for everybody to just start walking around with a gun. And you know what's going to happen?
Yes. Of course, you know what's going to happen. That's what I'm saying. Everything's turning into the OK Corral, right? I mean, like, seriously, if you're walking around with a handgun, like you're walking. So where are you allowed? This is the question, right? Now, where are you allowed to bring that gun?
Well, you know, at the OK Corral, right? Like, only the lawmen were allowed to have guns. You weren't really supposed to have guns in the city limits anyway.
Fair enough. Good point. That's a good point. Even my spaghetti Western reference isn't accurate to our current out of control gun laws. That's right.
Like, you had to check your guns before you were allowed at that saloon.
That's right. Well, I think, you know, what they were pointing to now after the aftermath of the decision, they were talking. Oh, look, now the question is going to be a series of lawsuits that are going to be filed. The immediate, because, you know, like Kathy Hochul of New York, governor of New York, basically came out immediately and says, okay, we're going to have a special session that we're going to set up, that we're going to review these laws to make them in compliance, because they don't want to kind of things to go nuts. What's going to happen? So if you restrict, you're not allowed to have. Now, Brett Kavanaugh actually kind of chimed in and basically said, well, you know, there's some reasonable places where you can restrict these things. That's not going to hold. We've seen every other precedent.
Some reasonable places,
like schools, right? You shouldn't be able to carry a gun in there. But, like, why? What's the logic? I mean, like, if you have an unconditional right to bear arms, right? Where does it stop? Where does the state say that it can do this? It already says, right, in the decision that opened all this stuff up, it already says the state can do this. And now they just overturned those laws where it said that the state could make reasonable restrictions. Okay, so now you've done that. So can I bring a handgun into a bar? Because guess what? There's potential threats in a bar. I'm worried for my safety in a bar, because there's other people there that might fight me. So I need to be able to carry my handgun into a bar, right? Mm-hmm. Because without it, I'm potentially at risk of getting hurt. So I need to be able to protect myself. That's going to be the argument. And, you know, I mean, like, hey, a whole bunch of people sitting in a bar drinking with guns. You see where that ends up. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like, it's like, it's bad, right?
It is, and they're harping on, because the GOP likes to harp on the whole, you know, good guy with a gun mythology, right? So, but I mean, did you see what Ted Cruz has put out this past week?
No.
Not that anybody really cares about Ted Cruz.
What did Gollum say?
Well, that's an insult to Gollum.
Fair enough.
Ted Cruz, I don't know. He wants to have guns in schools, and I guess he was putting something forth in the Senate. It was either in the Senate or in his own state about, you know, arming teachers and these people and stuff like that. So that's what he wants to do. He says the only way to protect our children, basically, is if we have armed guards in schools.
I just say arm the kids, because the kids are going to see the danger first. And like, from what I've understand, kids have a lot less kind of like worried about social morals and things like this. So, they'd have no problem shooting that bad guy. Right away, wouldn't even kind of cause, just become whatever. And, matter of fact, you could have games, right? The kids could get trained about how to use weapons in school. It'd be great. Right. So
that's what I mean. Like, where is it gonna stop with all that
well,
stuff?
that's just
like,
it.
I mean, who wants to? Now, mind you, I understand that there are schools that have, a lot of law enforcement in them. I don't agree with that, period, right? I don't think that school should be a place for any of that. I don't think you should have parole officers. I don't think you should have probation officers. I don't think you should have law enforcement. Like, I don't even like it when the cops randomly walk around schools once in a while. I just don't really think that's the place for that. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I'm not really sure. This is, you're kind of right, because it does remind me of the Wild West, right? Like, there is so little regulation, I think, on something like this, and it's just going to create this like major host of problems. Yeah, I mean, and also too, now, did you see that this goes along with that, the whole like Miranda right thing?
No, I didn't see this. Are you
You
serious?
didn't see that either?
No.
So something about Miranda rights, or like you can't sue a cop now if they make a mistake and they don't.
Oh, I heard about this. So something was actually decided on this?
I think so.
Oh,
I'm not entirely sure, but one of my friends was telling me about something about the Miranda right. Like I said, there's been so much this week. I haven't had a chance to look into all of that stuff yet. So
I mean, I'm thinking, and I've said this on the show like the past couple of weeks, where I've just been, the transition to summer for me has been weird. I mean, my wife got COVID right as kind of school was like letting up, and then that threw everything into kind of a different mode, let's just say, and then transitioning into kind of what are my kids going to be doing this summer, and then a whole bunch of stuff has just got me in that kind of space. So I can barely keep up, and I literally like this week I'm just kind of reading things day after day and just like, holy shit. And like I was looking, there's things that are happening at the level of the climate right now, right? Like you're watching like, the Colorado River Basin, all the kind of water, like they're saying that it's the worst drought in the last 1,200 years, right, out west right now. And I could barely find articles on it, right, without digging. Was certainly not coming up in my feeds because everything else is insane, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like that stuff is so buried like between the layers of craziness that is happening right now that these long-term systemic problems don't even basically get the light of day half the time. So I don't know.
Yeah, everything's been dominated by the January 6th hearings this past like week and a half too.
Yeah, crazy. Well, so that's kind of where we're at, folks. Supreme Court stuff. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, maybe chat a little bit about January 6th stuff, a bunch of hearings that have been going out, maybe talk some positive news on the student loan debt relief, although everything is in quotations with asterisks and footnotes when you have to kind of talk about these things. And maybe we'll get a little update about where we are in the Wheel of Time sagas, right? Over here. But this is Kevin Mahoney here once again with Amy Connect, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be chatting about some of that stuff, kind of see where things are, try to maybe leave us on a little bit of a hopeful note today on this very, very dark day. And we'll give you information once again if we have any new information about kind of actions coming up today or this weekend. So hope to see you at some of those. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We're going to be back right after this quick break.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1880. Chicago labor leader Agnes Nestor was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Her father had been a machinist and a member of the Knights of Labor. Like many other families of the era, the Nestor family moved to Chicago during the Depression that swept the country in the mid-1890s. Agnes went to work at a glove-making factory. At the factory, the women were charged for the power it took to run the sewing machines. They also had to pay for the needles they used. Agnes helped to lead a successful strike against these practices. The strike was supported by the men's union at the plant. Agnes recalled the aims of the strike, saying, "No more machine rent, no paying for needles, free machine oil, union shop, raises for the cutters who were paid the lowest wages." Agnes went on to describe the day-to-day organization of the strike, saying, "We joined the picket line again and held meetings every day and evening in the hall the cutters had rented. How important we felt. Speakers sent to our evening meetings were furnished by the Chicago Federation of Labor Organization Committee." After the strike had lasted more than a week, management sent letters to the employees offering to meet almost all of their demands. However, they refused to recognize the union. The women turned down the proposal, and after 10 days, the women won their demands, including the right for union representation. In 1902, Agnes led the women glove makers on a campaign to form their own union. She also served as the president of the Chicago Women Trade Union League for more than 40 years. Agnes Nestor spent her life fighting for women's right to vote, the 8-hour day, and child labor protections. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken, here once again with Amy Connect. Yes, I assume that everybody, if you're listening right now, that you've heard about the Roe v. Wade decision, that they've overturned Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court. But we've got some other things we want to touch upon kind of briefly today. I mean, I guess the one bit of, say, positive news that I really wanted to highlight, because this really does point to the effect of organizing, right? I mean, because you have the debt collective and the folks that are organizing to get rid of student debt, to cancel student debt, that pressure being consistently being brought upon the Biden administration, basically to make good on a campaign promise and more, to eliminate $10,000 in student debt across the board, although they still are deciding about that. There was just another announcement this week by the Department of Education that they're getting ready to cancel an additional $6 billion in student loan debt that'll be for about 200,000 borrowers who were kind of misled or defrauded by mostly for-profit colleges and universities. And that's a big step, right? We saw an $25 billion in student loan debt eliminated for 1.7 million borrowers. If anything, you're seeing that, okay, the Biden administration has the ability to do this, right? That's what they're showing us. They're showing that they have the ability to do this. So the question is, what are they going to choose to do? And so far, it's been this targeted debt cancellations thing instead of across the board. They say that they were supposedly going to get an agreement on this or a decision about if they're going to actually make good on their campaign promise to cancel $10,000 in student loan debt across the board by August 31st. Of course, they have to start talking about, like, should we means test it only for certain people who meet these criteria? I don't know why on earth you would do that. Why would you just not make this simple, straightforward, right here, especially if you have any concern whatsoever about winning an election in the fall? Right? So, I mean, why not say $10,000? You got student debt, $10,000. Done. We're there. Boom. Here's your Biden check, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole idea. So that's,
I don't know why he hasn't done that beforehand. Like, I don't know why. He's been talking about this since he's been elected, and this is ridiculous. Like, how many people would benefit from $10,000 off of? I would. I know I would.
Anybody who has gone to college for the most part would benefit from this, right? Because, yeah. I mean, look, there's a few people who went to college and don't have any student loan debt. Guess what? Okay, they don't have any student loan debt, right? So they've got no debt, right? So you don't need to worry about those folks, right? Are they going to be resentful? I don't know, but they don't have any debt, so I don't know what they're resentful about, right? I mean, it's like, whatever. It's like those folks, I mean, the vast majority of people carry debt, right? And, again, like it said in, this disproportionately, right? This will, and this is probably what part of the holdup is because they know disproportionately it's gonna affect, like, Black women are gonna be helped the most, right, by that kind of policy, precisely because they carry more debt from organizations that have preyed on them, right? I mean, this is why it's so insane to me. But again, this is a classic Democrat move, right? Well, we need to look at all the things. We need to come up with the perfect policy, which deals with all these, moving parts, and as opposed to just making something simple that impacts people's lives, right?
And popular.
Right? I mean, why you would hamper? Why would you put on your kind of what do they call those things? Like like with the goat hair shirts or whatever they used to wear. You know what I'm saying? Like
a goat hair shirt?
Goat hair shirt or something. I'm getting the wrong. There's these Christian monks who used to put on this fabric, these shirts with this like horribly scratchy, uncomfortable, prickly burlap shirts, maybe it is, right? As a way of kind of like recognizing suffering, right? So they would put it, they'd have to suffer.
Are you talking about the guys that whip themselves?
Well, there's those too, right? There's those too, right? But something like that. Yeah, it sounds like who whip themselves and all that kind of, the Opus Dei people. We're gonna go on those things. But these were like these old, monks. They would, for penance, they would wear these whatever shirts they were. Scratchy clothing that would make them have little pricks and pains all day long, just to kind of suffer for the sake of suffering. But this, I mean, it's like here you've got the perfect alignment with, you have a stated policy goal, right, on your campaign to cancel $10,000, which is a pittance compared to what they could do, right? I mean, even Chuck Schumer, for Christ's sake, was arguing along with Elizabeth Warren for $50,000 in student loan debt forgiveness, right? And so Biden can't do that. No, he's got to do $10,000. Okay, then pull the freaking trigger, right? I mean, why overthink this thing? Right?
Because that's what they do. That's what the corporate Democratic class does. It's never fast, right? Yeah, they're very afraid of too much excitement. They're very afraid of too much enthusiasm about
weird.
Something. I don't know if they're afraid of being called radical. I mean, they're already being called radical. So what's the difference?
Yeah, it's like it's really they're literally having an argument with the 1990s Republican Party. That's who they're talking to. Because it's like that has no bearing on what our world looks like today to go for I mean, all it does is tamp down excitement of any potential excitement, right? That would motivate people to kind of get out and support you. It would kind of reveal to the world that you believe in something, right? And that are willing to act on it. I don't know, whatever. So whatever. But that's good news. I mean, it is good news. I mean, so I'm happy to hear that they're going to go ahead and do some of that stuff. So
definitely. I mean, every little bit helps, right? I mean, because that debt, because when you talk about a chunk of 10,000, it's not just a chunk of 10,000. You're also talking about helping, lowering your interest payments and stuff like that, because that's 10,000 off the principal. Is that what it's supposed to be? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it's huge. You got to see the point, because $10,000 in a student loan is not $10,000 period. It's $10,000 plus the accruing interest.
Yeah.
Right. So it actually has a longer term effect. So it's especially for folks that are carrying that debt, who are kind of relatively new graduates, right? Who've graduated in the past, say, 10 years or so. That's going to help them, there you go. Even disproportionately in some ways, right? Because it's going to actually eliminate that stuff from the principal. But then, and so that there's not going to be as much interest accruing. And frankly, for those folks who are at the other end of that, I was mentioning the statistics at the top of the show, who are maybe in their 50s and 60s, who are still have the student loan debt, all they have left is principal, right? Because they've already paid all the interest, because that's how these freaking, loan sharks work, right? That you have to pay primarily interest up front, right? Because the banks want their money first before you start kind of chopping down on the principal. So this would actually eliminate, like, you say they owe $20,000, it's going to cut that in half, right? So that's significant. I don't know why you wouldn't just say, because of, like, historically unique circumstances of an economic collapse in 2008 and a pandemic that we've just gone through, that we need to reboot the system. So we're going to hit the reset button and eliminate all that student loan debt right now. I'll tell you one thing, that what that would do is that would help out a lot of people right away. So
I think it would add a lot of financial security and stability. Maybe not security, but definitely stability, right? If you're eliminating one bill a month,
yep,
perhaps, or just like that amount of debt, what's that going to do? Oh, well, you know what, Kevin? Because it's going to raise people's credit scores. God forbid.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Can't mess with that.
No, they're even saying that, I heard this one random thing. I'm like, oh my God, please don't tie this together. But it's out there now. And now they're saying, like, well, if we put all that money back into the economy, people are going to want to spend it. And you know what's going to happen with then? Oh my God, it's going to cause more inflation. Right? They're like, you people are barking. Whatever.
Well, I think they need to start. I think perhaps maybe they need to address the price gouging issues that these corporations are doing. So
you think
maybe that might help with inflation right there.
Well, I don't know. Exxon Mobil has been hurting pretty badly for the past 3 years. Their record profits aren't record enough. Right. So
let me shed a tear real quick.
Wait, I'm waiting. Wait. I'm not going to hold my breath. No, crazy. So let's kind of real quick, and then we can talk a little bit more about Kim Badillion and Wheel of Time. But just want to get your kind of thoughts at this point on the January 6th hearings. And we know we were talking before the show a little bit. You've been watching kind of the full hearings through. I've been watching pretty much just kind of summaries and clips kind of in the evenings. But what's your take on things, Ben, so far?
So I'm only on day 3. Like I said, I haven't even finished all of it. They're very long. They're drawn out. Day 3 especially. So this has to deal with Mike Pence and about, the pressure that the Trump administration was putting on Pence to overturn the election and just like all of this stuff. I will tell you, so they're making a really good case, right? It is very apparent that this was not like a random thing that happened. It wasn't like a spur of the moment. People decided to like go and storm the Capitol. Like this was planned. Like this was in the works. Like Trump and his cronies and Rudy Giuliani, who I found out was drunk apparently majority through like this whole thing.
Which I hope is like a legacy that he will hold on, I really do. I hope that's
any
be
good
enduring.
legacy that man has had is now completely it's been all thrown out the window. I don't know. So they've done a really good job. I think the committee has done a good job of showing, even in like by day 2, that this is an issue. You have all these politicians who were like asking for pardons. They have staffers, Trump aides, people who are close to him, and they're like, you can't do this, you shouldn't be doing it, like just basically, and Trump running with it and being like, I'm going to do what I want. Right. Like that's essentially the gist, I think, of what this committee is showing, is that the former president of the United States was like, I'm going to keep going with these lies and hope that this works out for me, that these supporters of mine are going to secure the presidency for another few years. Because that's all I'm hearing. Is people are like, even like William Barr, the former attorney general, and I'm not a big fan of his because he supported and he let this stuff go for a long time. Right. But anyway, and he's talking about Trump and he's basically saying that he told the administration, this is nonsense. Like the election wasn't stolen. Like this is all a bunch of crap. But I did take note when William Barr was talking, when he was giving his testimony, I was a little upset because he had made mention that one of the most alarming, like the most alarming thing to him out of this whole process was how that Trump and his cronies were basically stating that the Dominion voting machines were somehow, if you vote for Trump, it's going to give it to Biden, right? Like they were somehow calibrated to to rig the election, and that's what he was most upset about. This is what the Attorney General, not that the President of the United States was talking about a stolen election, not about how he was not heeding at all to his staff, right? Like all he was looking for was a yes man like Rudy Giuliani to be like, oh no, we can do this. Or Eastman, who was like, no, we can do this, even though Eastman was telling other people other stuff that we can't. It was just a mess. It's such a mess. And I was really kind of like, I can't believe William Barr, the former Attorney General, that's what he found most alarming out of this whole thing. Because he was saying the precedent it's going to set. I'm like, the precedent of the president, you know,
right,
saying that if I lose, it's because the system was rigged. That's not alarming. That's not like the first major issue that you have with this whole thing. And to me, that just shows you the disconnect of a lot of people in government, Democrat and Republican, but then also too mainly with the GOP.
Yeah, 100%.
That was my takeaways, at least from day 1 to day 3 so far.
Well, let me ask you this: I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because I've been going kind of back and forth on this, and I trying to, like, well, here, let me ask first. What? On the one hand, right, I think it's really powerful that you're having all these Republican operatives that are testifying, right, for this, because it makes it very difficult to just say that this is just a kangaroo court or something like this, right? That you're actually, these were the people in positions of decisions who are telling this story on the record under oath, right, where about what happened. And so if it was just one of them doing it, it'd be one thing, but just to kind of the sheer consistency of the story of all these folks coming forward and telling that is impressive. However, once we got to the Mike Pence day, as you're saying, right, is it like Mike Pence gets kind of triumphed as this hero, right? And what do you think, like, on balance, like on the one hand, they're telling this compelling story about what's going on here, but there also seems to be like a project to kind of save the Republican Party, right?
Yeah.
Let me say it not as direct as that, because let's just say it's not without saying that it's a project, to say like there does seem to be one of the consequences of this could be like people are going to walk away from, oh, see, the Republicans aren't that bad. It was just this guy. It was just bad man. How do you think these hearings will benefit the Republican Party in terms of being able to sidestep the blame for, like, decades that have put us on this trajectory? I mean, I'm curious.
I don't think anything's going to change. I think they're going to go around it no matter what happens. I think probably they're going to be like, oh, it was all Trump's fault, right? Like, I could see the entire party at some point, maybe, or at least a portion of the party, like, they've already disavowed him. So here's the thing, though, Kevin, because, like, you have 2 GOPs. Like, people, like, I understand, like, the GOP has really gone down this, like, extremist path, right? But then within that, you also have other people who, like I said, who I feel like are a little, like, just disconnected with the seriousness of this issue, right? You have a judge who was speaking on of day 3. I think his name is Michael Ludig. I'm probably Ludig. Is that
Ludig.
How it is? Ludig. Anyway, I mean, and you have somebody like him, and he's very serious about when he's talking about these matters, but then he also defines them as in terms of, like, constitutional mischief.
Right.
The constitutional mischief. Somebody just tried the former president of the United States and his administration, or at least a portion of his administration, were hoping and actively trying to overturn an electoral count process by Congress. And this is constitutional mischief. So I feel like you have such this large proportion of these people who are in decision-making power spots, right? Like, and they're not, I just feel like the seriousness is being missed. I
Well,
guess,
that's
you know,
kind of
to
what
me,
I
this is
mean. I mean,
constitutional mischief, and I feel like that the Republican Party, they have a lot of infighting right now, right? Like you've got all of these extremists, and then you've got, I would say, mainstream Republicans, and what I think is going to happen is, yeah, I think they're going to just sidestep it. I think either there's going to be a split, right, or you're going to have everything blamed on Trump, and that's going to be the end of it. And then you're going to have, like you said, like the GOP is saved now, right? Because, oh well, we got rid of that person, or I don't know, but they're hailing Mike Pence, like you said, as that he did something unbelievably brave, right? And I don't think so. He did his job. He did what he was elected to do. He had a ceremonial position. I don't think we should be making this any more than what it needs to be, other than the threat that the Trump administration posed to his personal being, right? Like his actual well-being and other people in Congress.
well, and I think like, but I mean, I look at it. He did more than his job, right? He did the letter. He did the minimal thing that a human being would do in a situation like that, which is like, this is what you're supposed to do. Okay, I'm going to do it, right? I mean, like that. However, in the 4 years before that, he's instrumental in bolstering up everything that led to that point.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's what I mean. I don't think that they're going to hold, I don't think this is going to matter. I don't think the J6 committees, I don't think any of the hearings are going to matter for I think majority of the GOP, because I don't think they've already been labeling it as a kangaroo court. You have these people who are on like the extreme right, and they're like, it doesn't matter. This is, you know, all of it's false, right? Like all of it's being falsified, and you have a base who is so entrenched in these lies, right, and so like it's not going to matter. Like I think it's good what they're doing. I think it needs to be done, but I don't think that it's going to change much for the GOP.
Well, and I think what I worry about is this is that what should happen in my view at this point, right, is like the Republican Party should be tied to all this stuff that is going on. That it shouldn't just be Trump bad man. It should be this is what led to Trump bad man. Everything that Trump did,
yeah,
everything that comes in here was dependent upon 2 decades, if not more, of Republican Party politics. The Republicans are the one, when John McCain chose Sarah Palin, right, as a running mate, and she was a freaking nut job who was tapped into all these conspiracy theories, that wasn't the extremists in the party. That was John McCain, the guy who's championed as, you know, the guy, the moderate, the maverick guy, choosing the ultra right wing at that point, right, to bring that base in. It has been the party that has been using kind of racist whistleblowing for like decades as a way to accomplish its ends. It's the way that it has kind of toyed around with the fascist ends of its politics in order to kind of achieve kind of electoral victory for the quote unquote mainstream Republicans. And so my biggest concern about these hearings is that it's going to let those people off the hook, that we never get, like, because what should happen is like the Republican Party should be allowed to implode in my mind, right? I mean, it should be allowed to implode and have to reorder. They shouldn't be rewarded by having few people saying, look at those courageous Republicans who stood up for American democracy. That's basically doing what Nancy Pelosi said. We need a strong Republican Party. Right? And I'm like, look, the only one who doesn't think there's a strong Republican Party, Nancy, is you. They are the ones who are dominating politics right now. I don't know what you mean by they're not a strong Republican Party. They are a strong Republican Party. They're just not the people that you want to have coffee with. Right? That's all she's talking about. So the thing is, like, look, if in the past, look, in American history, parties have divisions. Right? And especially in a two-party system, they have divisions, they have schisms, and they split.
Oh my God, Kevin, we should do a whole segment on how the Republican Party actually formed.
It's crazy, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And even like I look at, so things like that, that would be actually awesome. That'd be awesome to do. That'd be a lot of fun.
I bet you a lot of people would be pissed off.
We should do something on that.
We could go into the history of like the barn burners and all these people.
Yeah. That'd be fun. All right, I'm making notes of that because that'd be a lot of fun. But you know what I mean. So we take a long view of history, right? There are times which these things happen in political parties, right? And look, it's not up to the opposing political party to go in and play doctor to that party, right? At that point you should be exercising governance, right? You should be concentrating on winning elections in order to kind of assert a particular kind of like vision of the world. Like if the Democrats are not completely destroyed and falling apart, then the Democrats should be able to step in and kind of like pass policies, not spend their time trying to rectify Republicans. Like let the Republican Party die as far as I'm concerned. I mean, for example, if I would be saying the same thing, if you had a strong progressive component of the Democratic Party that threatened to split the party apart, right? If you had you look at the concentration of right wing kind of off the cliff people in the Republican Party today, right? That's like, the majority of Republicans, right? Who are elected office. If that was true of the Democratic Party, and the Republicans say, no, we need to kind of step in and kind of like make sure that the Democratic Party, I'm like, no, let it go. The corporate Democrats have been holding us back long enough. Let it go. It's going to take some time, but we need to kind of build this alternative.
But you're right. This is what happens. Like the country has gone through a bunch of different political parties, but we've had the Republican and the Democrats for so long.
Yeah.
For so long without having a serious third option or fourth option. So I agree with you though. I think that the Republican Party should implode because I think that's the natural course of what's happening. I don't think that the Democrats need to save anything. I think they need to just keep on with what, their agenda is and let them, but I do, because I do see. Do you think that the Republican Party is going to lose a lot of party members?
No.
Or they're just going to chalk it up and be like, even the mild ones, they're just going to be like, all right, well, whatever. This is still just fringe people.
There was that guy. Yes, there was that guy, who testified. I mean, you might not have seen this one yet. So I think this was day 4, actually. This one guy, he was the Speaker of the House in Arizona, right? Who talked about the threats, the direct threats that he was getting, that we had Trump on the phone, you have people on the phone pressuring him to overturn the elections, right? And the guy was practically in tears. Like he's sitting there, his daughter was in the house with a terminal illness dying as people were threatening him, right? And his wife and his family calling him, showing up outside his house, calling him a pedophile, calling him like all this. I mean, this is a conservative Republican who had campaigned for Trump, right? Going up, and this guy, his testimony was freaking top notch and was amazing. And I believe everything he said. He said, look, why would I violate my oath? The oath that I took to the Constitution that I believe is divinely inspired. Now, take that and put that in a box, right? Because like, okay, he really believes like God, did this. Okay, fine. But that's his belief. And so he's not going to violate his oath. And he's being called a pedophile I mean, this is like crazy stuff, right? So he gets in there. He gives, like, by all accounts, the star witness testimony for this, right? But then he gets asked, "Would you vote for Trump again if he gets the nomination?" He's like, "Oh yeah."
Are you serious?
Yes. He didn't say that during the testimony. He said he was asked this in a separate interview, and he said, "If he's the Republican nominee, I will vote for Republican nominee because the Democrats are the greatest threat to American freedom." Right? It's the same thing that Bill Barr said.
Right? This is what I mean. It's that the disconnect. Like, I don't see how you can't see. You're still supporting this extremist stance by supporting it.
No, but that's what I'm saying. They're already extreme. These people are already extreme. They're not the like. I mean, why would you want to save that party? Right? And there's these, look, and I look at it like this. Look, if there's these people that believe the Republican Party is something other than those kind of extremist politics, well, then guess what? Those people in the Republican Party have to form their own third party and run it. And because
that's
otherwise,
what I was expecting to happen. That's what I was expecting to happen. I'm not. I don't know. I mean, I still
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of infighting, and it possibly could, but I think it really just depends on the trajectory of like where they go in the next couple years.
No,
Because I do see the majority of these extremist Republican politicians really taking control
yes.
over a lot of stuff. I don't know, but then I don't feel so bad for some of these Republican politicians because I'm like, you guys made your bed, like lie in
That's
it.
what I mean. It's like that's what I'm
I hate
saying.
to say it that way, but because I feel like we should all be on the same side fighting, right? Like against the extremist stuff. But but that guy, I didn't see day 4 yet, but see that right there. Any empathy I have for him about being called a pedophile or any of that stuff just totally went out the window when he's like, well, of course I would vote for Trump again. Like, why?
I know. Exactly. And Bill Barr gets up there and says that this is full of bullshit and all this kind of stuff. And then he's asked like a couple of days later, would you vote for, oh, of course, he was the Republican nominee. I'd vote for, I mean, so you cannot save that. Right?
I don't know why they think Democrats are so like the devil all the time, because I don't understand like I get the polarization on some issues, but for like your everyday stuff, I don't understand a lot of this. That like I don't think that all Republicans have horns and are like, actively trying to subvert democracy. I don't know why people think all Democrats are.
Well,
it's so strange.
But that's because I really do think this is the 30-year project of the extremists, like the extremists taking over the Republican Party. That ideology has infected the party as a whole at this point. And so that's why there's these people that are out there that are saying, oh, the moderate Republicans, like even like, okay, the Brian Fitzpatrick right here, right? Bucks County, the moderate Republican. But that's my point, right? He's the one
moderate.
Exactly, but he's the one that gets held up.
Yeah.
By comparison, right? That guy is a moderate compared to that guy I just talked about, right? But he's no moderate, right? I mean, he kisses up to or is on the extremist end of kind of American politics as it is. So it's like, so why would I think what the Republican plans, all these like the Lincoln Project, the kind of like the no Trumper Republicans and all that kind of stuff, you can start seeing this getting pressured on cable news now. Is that when they're having what they wanted to do is they wanted the centrist and the conservatives and the Democratic Party to do that work for them. And by and large, that's what they've done. And so like Chris Hayes, for example, this is I was listening to the podcast. I wasn't watching it. And I can't remember the woman's name he had on, but it was one of these never Trumpers. And he started pushing back on her and about the Republican Party. And she started getting mad at him, right? Because now it's time for Democrats to stand behind those Republicans and not run candidates against them for those ones who stood up to Trump.
Why?
Because
they wouldn't do the same, but they would not do the same in the reverse situation.
But Raffensperger, whatever's down in Georgia, stood up to Trump. So therefore, we should celebrate him because he's a defender of democracy. Democrats should not run a candidate against him because we need to stand behind people who are defenders of American democracy. That's the line that they're taking. Every
elected official is supposed to be a defender of our democracy. Every elected official.
Right.
Regardless of party.
Right. But they're playing some weird team sports thing. They're not playing whatever. So it's like, here you go. That's one thing. Anyways, whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm really curious about where this lands because like, I find like, you have these Democrats, these high profile Democrats, some of them who are on that commission who are going to get these interviews. And part of it's just the way that the hearings have to be structured by interviewing so many Republicans. And it has to be that way. But then the other part of it is so they're referring to those Republicans, but then they're using the monikers of like courageous Americans, patriotic Americans, right? Stood up for what is right. And people hear those words.
Yeah.
Right. And they're being asked because I think part of it's our celebrity culture too. We're being asked to kind of like imbue our own desires into these people as minor celebrities. Right. And it's just a weird kind of situation that I'm concerned about that's going to have a negative impact because it's going to basically, I think, convince some of those moderate Republicans to just go along and continue to vote Republican and not think about what their party has become.
Do you think it's going to result in any type of indictments or anything, any type of penalties?
I actually do.
For anybody?
I actually do. I think that
other than the people that were in the Capitol building, like the civilians. Like I'm
no,
talking
I do.
like actual like penalties of politicians.
Yeah, that guy. What's his? I'm spacing his name. Jeff, the lawyer that Trump wanted to put ahead of the Justice Department.
I don't know his name.
Hold on, let me look him up.
There's so many people.
Yeah, Jeffrey Clark. He had the FBI raided his home yesterday. Right? And he's the guy who pled, they said this in the hearing yesterday, who pled the fifth, something like 140 times or something like that during the hearings. So he had his house raided and things like that. So I think people like Jeffrey Clark, there's some other names that are starting to come up. Tom Wolfe just called for Scott Perry's resignation. Saying,
good.
Yep, he said basically came out, put it on Twitter. We'll see how it's going to make the news. Basically saying, given the revelations that have come out during the January 6th hearings yesterday about judicial appointments and his role in all that he should resign. So I think there's going to be some consequences. Whether they ever get to Trump or not, we'll see. My guess is that it doesn't get to Trump, but
they're going to get him on like something stupid like tax evasion.
Look,
New York State's going to get him on something.
Look, at this point, if they lock that guy up for the rest of his life, I'd be happy. So,
yeah.
But crazy. So, yeah. So, January 6th, student loan stuff.
You think they're a waste of time then? Like the
No,
hearings?
I do not.
No.
I think that, look, because I do think that they're doing an exceptional job of laying out what happened, how it happened, who did what, and the point that it makes it extraordinarily difficult to insert like alternate narrative within that. And I do think at the very least the work that they're doing for the historical record and any kind of saneness that we might have in our future about being able to look at what happens in terms of how a coup happens, right? How this is doing that. And that is, I think, absolutely critical. Now, I would go a step further to say kind of what the question you were just asking. I do think there should be people to pay the price, right? But I think the bigger impact of what this is going to do is make it extraordinarily hard for people to wiggle out of this. And the fact that, you have people who have been outright denying any, like, for example, Scott Perry was begging for a pardon. Right. And he denied having to say this, thought it was ludicrous, say that this is a travesty and all this, but they've got the receipts. They've got the receipts of him asking for it. And he's still trying to deny it. Right. I mean, that's the kind of thing that makes it extraordinary when you have the record of the person asking directly and they try to deny it, you hold up their email. Right. I mean, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to maintain that position.
Fake news.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing I think that will have a lasting impact. I think that is actually going to have an impact on journalism. I think a lot of journalists were really emboldened by what they were finding. And the fact, I don't think that the January 6th Commission would have been as deeply cutting had it not been for journalists who were doing the work that the government should have been doing for a long time. But then I also, on the flip side of it, I think there's going to be a group of journalists at least that are going to look at this and being like, that's what we need to be investigating. And it's showing you how the degree to which you need to be able to get to the truth. It's not just about asking this person one thing and asking the other person for their take on it. No, you've got to actually get the receipts to this. So in my best hope, that's a rebirth of kind of like a really kind of cutting, nitty gritty investigative journalism. That would be great. What's more likely is that you're going to have a bolstering, I think, of that kind of critical skepticism within some of the media corps. Not everybody, but I do think that'll help, right? So and for someone like you too as well, who knows history, likes history, thinks the importance of history. These things matter, for the long term. I don't know how much it's going to help us in the short term, however. So
Yes, that's the downside of history. It's generally takes a while for
Yep.
you to see changes and things like that. So
No, exactly. Exactly. So, so before we talk Wheel of Time, let's talk a little bit about a favorite kind of like troll in the backyard, Kim Badillion.
oh.
So, so I didn't even see this week. I've been like I said, I've been just barely kind of holding together my life. But you brought this up. She had a little email apparently this week.
She did. I guess she emailed. So I'm part of like a bunch of different Facebook groups and stuff like that. And one of them is involved with Penridge, and it has somebody had legally obtained a copy of her. They called it a manifesto, and I guess you could call it that. But it was legally obtained by a right to know request, and it basically stated it was a letter addressed. I think it was the Percy Borough about celebrating Pride for the month of June, and how upset she was about it, and how that she feels that it allows inappropriate sexual content, topics about sexuality and gender, that she feels aren't appropriate, I guess, for Percy Borough. So her thing is against the whole Pride celebration, right? She included pictures. She called out different organizations like the Rainbow Room, which does amazing work down in Doylestown. Yep. For the LGBT Q plus community. And she's really harping on this. Now I don't live in Percy, right? But I have not really heard that there's been problems with this before, that people seem to enjoy it, right? Because she also had put in there too that there was a children's tent that had books in it, and there was books, that promoted same-sex marriages and relationships. One of them she specifically put out there was Worm Loves Worm, which I thought was just adorable.
Yes.
It's crazy because she reminds me of the people that were harping on the Mouse, right? The graphic novel, because it showed apparently a naked mouse, and that was totally inappropriate for children, and she's based Kim Badillion, and she speaks, I guess, at the Penridge meetings
all the freaking time.
Yeah, I don't make all of them. I was supposed to go to the one this week. I did listen into it a little bit. Some things had come up, but yeah, so this is the letter. I mean, and it's available, so I mean, I wonder if I could share that regular, outside the group and stuff. But that's the type of person, she's harping on this, and it's crazy because her son, I've heard speak at the Penridge board meetings, and he likes to talk about all of this as well, but he doesn't even have children in the district. They go to private school.
Yep.
So I was told. So.
Yep. Kim Badillion is the one that basically caused the huge uproar on the kind of on the DEI, around the DEI committee, by basically attacking Dante. I'm spacing his last name, but basically
Dante and Adriana King.
Yeah. Dante King and Adriana King, basically attacking them directly by making up some money laundering kind of narrative about their juice business, right? I mean, it was freaking crazy. And she was the one who basically instigated that.
Oh, she said that the profits basically were being used from their juice business to funnel
into her nonprofit, right? All this, whatever. I mean, it's just whatever. But here's a little taste of Kim Badillion's email to Jeff Hollenbach, who's the mayor of Percy. She prefaces by saying, "My understanding, the borough council passed this resolution making June Pride Month, blah blah blah." But then she comes in, following the passage of the resolution on June 26, 21, a Percy Pride Festival was held within the borough. Of concern was the fact that the festival, which focused on sex and sexuality, had portions directed towards children. Those children. For instance, there was a children's book tent that contained, among other things, books concerning themes of sexuality and radical gender theory. Boys can be girl, and in parentheses, boys can be girls can be boys, and they can be both or neither. On parentheses. One such book was Worm Loves Worm. As you may be aware, worms are known to have the unusual characteristic of being both male and female. Worms are not humans, but the implication that gender can change and or is fluid is being made and directed towards impressionable children. That's the beginning of her email.
I like how she puts out that worms aren't human beings.
Yep.
Like
That's good.
She has to make that clear.
Yeah, just so, to impressionable children might then think that gay and lesbian folks are not human beings, right? So, I mean, like,
exactly.
Jesus Christ. Oh, my God. I'm telling you, this place is it's like we've been saying for a long time now. This is not going away, right? This is not going away. Crazy. Well, so thank you for bringing that to my attention this morning, because that's,
sure.
It gives me something to kind of like love hate at the same time, Oh God. So hey, let's talk just briefly. What's happening with the Wheel of Time? How are you doing with that?
I'm doing all right. It's a big book. So I've already read
long.
a couple. Yeah, like I had previously read some of the chapters beforehand. So I was basically rereading it. I'm up to like chapter 16.
Which is like the middle of the book, right? It's like the big, huge thing.
It really is. But I will tell you, I definitely, I'm going to have to say, so I don't like Rand.
No, yeah.
In the series, I don't like him. I don't mind him so much in the story, but I did like how the series put a big focus on Moraine. I think there's a little bit more of her in the series than there is in the book, and I thought that was nice. I thought that was a really nice twist. To bring out her perspective, I think, a bit more.
Yeah, this is one thing. I think I may have mentioned that to you, that for me was like the big. I was surprised because I had not read the book at all, right? So I watched the series first, and it went back to the book, and that was the one thing that I missed, was that you started, so much of the book, at least this is the first book in whatever the 11-book series or whatever the hell it is. Right. But the where, it keeps with that kind of coming of age stories of this boy. Right. And, not that there's anything wrong with that. Right. That's not the thing. But I found, I'm not a fan of Rand either. Right. In either the series or the book, to be honest with you. I mean, I
don't mind him so much in the series or in the book. The series, I just don't like the person that they picked for him. He's just, I agree. I don't see him as the same character from the book.
No.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
He's a matter of fact, the fact that in the series, I'm sorry if we have any, I should have said there might be any little spoilers here for people, but there is, I'm being very careful not to kind of go into like major plot things here, but the fact that he was, of all the characters on the series, that he was like clean cut. And that for me was like completely not believable right from the get-go, just as like a casting and directorial choice kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that I didn't even know if I didn't like his attitude. I didn't like the way he whatever. Some other people might liked it. What's fine, but and maybe this colored the way I read the book too as well, because I couldn't quite get that out of my head as I was reading. So
well, and I always have that problem. See, if I read a book first, right, like I always like, that's the impression that I have of the character, and that's how it is with anything. You already have like a preset perception of how somebody might look or how they might act or something like that, and then you go to a televised or a movie, and then you have casting choices and stuff, and you're like, God, like, what were they thinking? Like, that's not the person I thought at all. But I did like Moraine. I do like I forget who did they pick who plays her? I forget her name.
I'll look it up. I
do like her. I do like the cast pick for her. But like I said, I did enjoy the series. It's a little, I think they focused a little bit more on the feminine.
It's like Rachel something,
aspect of it, considering how much power
Yes.
the females have in the book.
Series cast. Here we go. Rachel something, isn't it? Is it Rachel? Oh no, Rosamund Pike. Rosamund Pike is her name.
Yeah, she's a lot younger too than I actually thought she was. But anyway, I do like her as her pick as the casting pick for her. So I did enjoy that.
Yeah,
But like I said, the series is good. The series is rushed. That's all. But it's yeah. This is a big book. I mean, you could probably
huge.
do a couple of seasons in one in one story. I'm excited to see the next series, but I do want to finish up the book though before the next season comes out.
Yeah, I think that I agree what you say. With Moraine is that she was, it's funny. It's like I had this other layer. Like one, yes, I agree with you with that. Having her as the kind of where the series begins is with her, and not
Mm-hmm.
with Rand. I thought was for all the reasons you just said. I 100% echo that. And I thought it actually told a more compelling story that way too as well, because like she's the one with the history, with the background, with can see the bigger picture, right? And that's built
Yeah.
into what her purpose, like her character's quest in many ways is in the both in the book and the series. So
Yeah.
that I really liked. And the other thing that I thought was interesting about her as a choice is because it took me a while to warm up to her character in on the series, right? Because she was so kind of flat in terms of the way that she was presenting it, right? The way that she was kind of acting in the beginning, just the way when I read the book, I was like, holy shit, she nailed it. Because it was like that really was her character.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so much about how she's described in the book and how her role is. I was like, oh, that it was like, so it went from kind of like, ooh, I'm really glad they did this. I like her character. I wasn't quite as like there with her kind of early on in the series. And then when I read the book, I was like, holy shit. It was like, she does an amazing job of capturing her character. So
Yeah, I mean, and she's not very likable, I think, in the book in the beginning. Like, she is very like she's very in control of the situation. Like, and she doesn't tell them everything, right? Like, so she doesn't tell. I don't want
right.
to say kids, but she doesn't tell them all of what's happening, and she does come off, I think, as cold, a little cold, right? And you discover later on that she's not, but
right. And she also is also kind of like I also think she comes from she is a she comes from a more of an upper class background, I think, too, as well, in terms of how she
yeah,
gets in there. And
yeah,
also she's incredibly disciplined, right? In terms of how she disciplines herself and her thought
yes.
process and all this, which what you saw in the series, I'm like, oh shit, that's her. I mean, that's like, so, oh god, so okay, no, there. Sorry, get like these phones ringing and things like this next to me. But that was really good. The character that I tell you I wanted to love, and I think this is Robert Jordan, the author of it, was his not knowing how to write her was Nynaeve. I don't know how to say, is like I didn't like in the series how like antagonistic she was toward like immediately.
I found that to be something. I was like, that doesn't seem like her character at all.
Yeah. And I think, and I also think that that gets kind of pushed in the book too. It's like he writes her as a little bit more kind of like just unpredictable. I liked her more in the book than I did in the series. No, I shouldn't say. I liked her character a tremendous amount. I just thought in the series, I thought like I loved her, right? Except I was like, why is they having her do this, right? Why is she like immediately like hand on the knife, right, when she walks in the door? It's like, you get to that unpacks a little bit more better in the book. But I would have loved to see more room given to her character. Is basically what I would say.
Yeah, maybe in the next couple they will. I mean, I've never even opened another book of his. I haven't, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure how it's gonna play out.
Yeah.
I am kind of curious to see how the ending of the book goes, though, considering I have seen the whole series, so I'm kind of I don't know. Like I said, I'm really hoping they do something with his character in the series, because like Rand is just like, he really is killing it for me. Like, I like everybody else for the most part.
I'm not going to give you a read one way or the other on that, because I want to hear what your take is on it.
Yeah.
I can't wait to have that discussion, because it'll just be kind of interesting to see how like that kind of, those points of comparison to what they did in the series because, very much in the series, we, well, no, I don't want to do any spoilers. I don't want to say anything to anybody who wants to watch the show.
Yeah. Well, I will though. So the opening, right, of the book and then the opening of the series, I do think that they gypped the character though, Rand, because in the book they do. Now you said your copy's a little different than mine, but they have see, in mine they immediately start out with Rand and his father, and them like he's instantly confronted with like the darkness, right? So to say, like dark figure and stuff like that. And I really think that they did a disservice in the series by not opening with that. I think they could have given at least 5 minutes of their time to something like that, because I really do think that like, because in the series I was watching it and I was like kind of confused at first, because like I said, I didn't realize what I was watching was this book that I had started reading, because there were differences and stuff like that, and then it didn't occur to me until about halfway through the first episode, you know what I mean? But I did like the fact of how they introduced Rand and his family. But I will tell you though, the author gives it away in the very beginning, because I don't know if I should say too much, but he talks about, like, you can tell who's going to be the one,
yes,
right? Like,
exactly.
I think he immediately gives that away. Like, there is no doubt in my mind, first chapter, second chapter aside, of like, who the main character is going to be. Yeah,
the series much better about that. Much better
they do leave you like questioning a little bit, and then in the book it's like divulged like immediately.
Yep. And I think the way that you learn it in the series, right, is awesome. Right? It's like, number one, I'll say this, it's my favorite fight scene of almost any freaking like fantasy thing that I've ever seen in my life. Right? I think that I actually watched the behind the scenes about the opening scene. I think it's like episode 7 or something like this, about how they did camera work and everything from this, because I was like so taken back by like just the choreography of the scene. And it was like, I shouldn't even probably said as much as I did already, but it's like, I mean, I found it like amazing and painful and horrifying and emotional all at once. I mean, it was incredible. So
see, I wasn't feeling any of that, but that's, like I said, that's because I already knew who it was, right? Like when the series started, I already knew who it was going to be, and I was like, well, why aren't they, like, what's with all the guessing game? But it did make it interesting, and it did add like a whole different perspective, and I think it allowed you into some of the other characters maybe a little bit. Maybe 100% better than in the book series.
Oh, totally. No, I think that it's that. Let me go back. I'm horrible with names, but like
I am too.
Egwene, right?
Yeah.
I think her character was robbed in the book compared to what we see in the series, because of what
She's
exactly
such a strong force in the TV series.
Totally. And she was a great actor. I mean, her character was great. She was awesome. And like, I'm looking for, she was like another one. I was like, I wonder if she's in other stuff, because she was just an amazing actor. All these actors too as well. I think that we're just, with the exception of Rand. I feel so bad saying that, but
I was disappointed because I instantly didn't like him.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that way in the book, right? Like, and I'll tell you, like, I don't think that there's a particular character so far that I don't really like in the book, but I do, like, in the series, I just can't get over that. I was like, no, like, I don't like it. He's too angry. He's too irritable. I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah. And I have to, the other person I love I rewatched the series. When I finished the book, I rewatched the series. Yes, I did.
Did you sleep?
Well, I had about 2.5 days like of the kids still being at school and me having time, like no one else in the house to do this, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like blow through it all. So I did. And so I rewatched it, and Matt's character, I love.
Yeah.
I love his character.
I liked his character. Yeah.
And the actor who plays him I have the second time seeing it, I didn't really cue in on this as much the first time I watched it, but I think reading the book and having some of the background here, I like what they did with him. I think even more in the series. But that actor I thought was tremendous. I mean, the way that they played the role and the way that they set up that character within the series, it was different than the book, but
Yeah.
in a bunch of different ways. But I thought he was great. And I did like the storyline that they put on him in the series. I thought it was really like super, say, believable and compelling as in terms of his kind of backstory.
I think so too. I think it definitely was. I trying to think. I like how they did. So I really enjoy in the TV series how they really made it a point though that the power, right? Like this power that like Maureen has and some females have, how like disastrous, damaging it is for the men of this world, right? And how it like consumes them and how it like just changes them and makes them like just these nasty people and
Yep.
power hungry. And it's just interesting. I always kind of felt like it's a little bit of a mirror of our own society. You know what I mean? About how like yeah, I maybe we should probably not go too much.
We'll get there. We'll get there. We promise
Yeah.
everybody. But yeah, that's really, really tremendous. Well, good. I have to say, I'm gonna. So for everybody too, I said this last week too. I'll say it again. So I'm gonna be on vacation for the next couple of weeks. So we are taking an uncharacteristically long vacation this year that I think we kind of need it. So I'm going to try to throw up a couple back episodes, right? Just so there's something kind of coming up for folks. And then when we come back, then hopefully then we'll be able to come back with Amy if that works out with your schedule, depending on where you're at. That Friday when we come back, if not, be kind of the week after. For those of you who know, Amy and I have been talking and trying to do this on a more regular basis, where she'll come in kind of twice a month, which would be freaking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully I'll start getting my schedule straightened out too as well, so it's not going to be so chaotic as it's been. I've got a bunch of people, actually. I've started getting emails from folks that want to come on the show for the interview thing. And really my holdup at this point is just finding the time to do this. And I think that what's going to happen, just FYI for everybody out there who's still hanging on, I may end up doing some daytime interviews, right? So basically I'll be posting the full interview, and they'll still be live, right? But it's not going to be at a consistent time. So there'll be the final versions of the podcast will be posted on a consistent day of the week and that kind of stuff. And then where possible, usually on our Patreon site is what I'll do is I'll put out a link, and it'll be on the public Patreon, right? So that, people want to follow us there too as well. I'll post a link if people want to watch it live, and then when it goes live, I'll tweet it out too as well. So if people do want to join live, but I recognize they're going to make it a little bit tricky for folks to join on a consistent basis. But I think it's important that again, I've had enough people contact me looking to come on the show, folks that I want to have on the show that I need to find some way of doing it. Just know it'll be a little bit more uneven throughout the summer months, but I want to make it happen to make sure that those things get out. Ideally, if I can, I'm going to try to keep the Wednesday evening time in mind, to kind of do, instead of a Monday one, to do a Wednesday one. There's that. Also, I just found out unexpectedly, I thought that my daughter's soccer went longer than it does, but it may be the case that if I'm reading the schedule right, that when I get back from vacation, that my Mondays are going to open up again. If that's the case, that solves a bunch of problems. Then I'll just go back to Monday nights, and that's an easy go. So I'll let
Monday nights are good.
Yeah, I think it's a good. I mean, the one thing that's bad for me is that it conflicts with the school board meetings, which is that's one thing, but it works best for my schedule around here too as well. So I'm hoping that I can keep that going. But I'll just want to let everybody know that. So look for that.
You could always set up at a school board meeting.
I could, except the you could set up. Well, no, I've thought about that, right? So I've thought about yeah. I did a lot more. I've done a lot more kind of short stuff that I've recorded in the past. Like I used to go to like when I used to go to a bunch of different kind of events and so on. I used to always bring my equipment, And I would do on the spot interviews with people that'd be willing to do it, and do kind of little Facebook Live updates from what was happening. And frankly, it's just, the only reason I'm not doing that as much now is just life happens, right? I mean, it just, my kids' schedules change dramatically as they get older, which, made it a lot more difficult to do certain things. So it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I'd love to be able to go and talk to people, and to talk to people going into the meeting, talk to people coming out of the meeting, to actually recording some of the meeting. Although we can just record the video that they do. So, anyways, I also I'm no shortage of ideas. I'm limited on labor. That's my that's the problem, right? That's always the perennial problem with this work. For there. One of the things I was going to say, so away, look for those things. I forgot. So, I know the one thing. So I'm going to be on the way. So I am going to start 2 new books, right? So I have to say this too as well. I mentioned to you the bone shards. Wait, what is it called? The bone shard emperor's daughter. The bone shard's daughter. The bone shard daughter, right? I'm reading the second book in that series called The Bone Shard Emperor. Yep. So I would highly recommend this to folks who are looking for some. It's another long book, just so you know. But it moves, my personal opinion, it moves a lot more quickly than the Wheel of Time does. Just in terms, it's a stylistic thing, and it also has to do with Bone Shard's daughter is also a long book, but also the printing of it, right? It's like, it's not as many words on a page as as the Wheel of Time. So, but it's by Andrea Stewart, and it is, I think I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but what's really cool about this book is the depictions of gender, right, are just much more fluid, right, than we have in our current world, right? So that you have relationships between 2 women, 2 men, or partnerships that are kind of not, say, strictly kind of marriage, or but still committed, right? So all this other kinds of stuff, and it's not remarkable. Right. That's the best part about the book, right? It's not something that's like, oh my gosh, right? It's just, or drawing attention to it. You really need to understand that these are both women, right? No, it's just there as built into the world. Right. And so I think for me, in this current climate where we see such attacks on LGBTQ history, to see this, to be inhabiting a world where it's not post anything, it's just the way that world works, right? It's the way that world works is that sexuality and kind of strict kind of gender laws are just not part of the world building, right? So it's really cool book, and it's a great story, right? It's a great story that does all sorts of different kind of magic systems and things that I've ever seen before. So I'm reading that. The other one that I'm reading, I'm really excited to read is oh God, come on. Let me see. Let me just bring it up here real quick. It's Adrian. I have to look at this guy's name to get it right, because it's long and Russian. Let's see. Come on. Give me my order list. Let's see. I just got it. It's a novella. So if you're looking for a break from the long books, it is, here it is. It is by Adrian. Let's see. I should have gotten this. Adrian Tchaikovsky. How's that? Not hard, right? So whatever. Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it's a book called Elder Race. He did it's kind of like a mix between, it sounds fascinating. It's like a mix between science fiction and fantasy. And the premise is that there's some kind of catastrophe. I haven't read anything. I just read about it so far. So I haven't read the book yet, but will on vacation. That there's this planet where the planet is at risk, right? And there's this woman who's kind of a little bit of an outcast in her town or community or whatever like this, but someone who believes in the power of magic, right? So, and she's thinks that there's this wizard who lives up on the on this mountain, right, that can be helpful in saving the world, right? And so she's convinced of this kind of stuff, and it builds this lore of that kind of magic system and some of the belief systems on here. Meanwhile, that wizard that's up on the hill is not a wizard, right? He's an anthropologist, right? Who's sent on this thing to observe these quote unquote primitive people, right? And is casting himself as this. So this belief system he's been integrated in this thing. And so he's from this highly technological advanced civilization who's going to this planet to observe them, right? But also sees that there's this problem with this world. And so it's just this kind of like this dual part. And he's also an outcast from his thing. He hasn't been around any other people for like years, right? He's set on this remote planet to do this thing. So it looks like this fascinating thing. I read some of his other work, and I'm really excited about this because I read this other book of his where it's a spider planet, right? There's these spiders that, but I'll tell you, there's these spiders that kind of, I'm telling you, it doesn't start as a spider planet. Like these spiders start to kind of like whatever, but if you can imagine, if you have to try to kind of construct an entire like species, highly intelligent species that is nonverbal, right? That expresses itself and communicates through kind of like vibrations on webs, right? And stuff like this. And to make that believable, he did it. Literally going through this book, I remember reading it, and my friend Seth said he loved this guy. And so I read this book. You get part of the way through it and suddenly realize like, oh my God, these spider things aren't talking to each other, and I'm in their heads, right? In the character, it's crazy, right? It's crazy. So
I don't know if I could do that one. I don't do spiders.
If you don't like spiders, you will not like this book.
I do not like spiders.
And it's not even like spiders of like, the spiders of like the horror spiders, right? It's like, it's not even like that, but still, it's really freaking creepy, right? You have to know a heck of a lot about spiders to make this species believable in that book. So
no.
Anyways.
No. I think I'll skip that one.
All right. So anyways. But anything else you got on a book list or anything like that? I forgot to ask you about this before the show, but yeah.
A book list. I always have a book list.
Yeah.
There's always stuff that I like dabble, like I'll like go between books and stuff like that. I'm still reading my Pearl book, Dragon Seed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm such a huge fan of hers, and that's a really good one. I do believe it actually takes place I'm going to say, I think, because Pearl Buck is really good about not specifying time and placement in her novels, like specifically. I'm going to say this is about like roundabout maybe the rape of Nanking. I'm not sure. It's hard to tell. I think. But it's a really good book. It's called Dragon Seed. I'm trying to think if there's... I always have Octavia Butler. She's on my reading list.
I love her.
I've only read one. I read Wild Seed. I want to read The Parable
of the Sower.
Yeah, The Parable of the Sower. I haven't read that one yet.
Amazing book.
And then I have a couple of other ones, more like political style books, in my library. I'm trying to think of that one that I haven't. I'd have to look through it. I just went and redid my whole office and stuff, so like everything is everywhere. All my books are like piled on the floor, so.
Cool.
I'm trying to think. I think everybody should read that Sun and Moon, the one that I had told you about. That's always a really good one.
Yep, that's on my list.
Especially if somebody's looking for something different, unusual, and funny. It is a funny book.
Yeah, I need more humor in my life. I need more.
Yeah. Well, if you need more humor in your life, have you ever read David Sedaris?
Oh, love David Sedaris. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Yeah, I read him. He makes me chuckle.
Yep. I think he's absolutely freaking hilarious. I mean, there's few things that I read that I'm like literally like bent over laughing, and like he is one of them.
He definitely did. I started reading him back in high school. He's hilarious.
Oh my God, he's
I always
my
pick
wife's
him
a
up.
huge fan of his too as well. And then so I
Nice.
read a couple of his things, and she's like a real fan. And then I read the rest of his stuff. I was like, it was great. It was awesome.
Yeah. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in his family. So.
Oh my God, can you believe it? I mean, can you even imagine? I mean, him and Amy Sedaris. I mean, those two together and like in the same space. I mean,
right?
I can't even imagine.
I know. Well, other than that, I was gonna say I don't really have any other books that I'm currently reading, or at least attempting to read. So, but I did want to make. Oh, so I got a message. I just wanted to reiterate all of the protest times for today.
Please.
There is going to be a 5 p.m. Newtown protest at Representative Fitzpatrick's office for anybody who is interested. And then again, the 7 p.m. at Sellersville at State Street and Temple Ave. And then also at 6 p.m. at Bucks County, the old courthouse, protests on the sidewalks at Court and Main Streets.
While you're doing that too, I think I just got another update. Let's see what we got here. This is, okay, so for those folks who are more in Philly, let's see, we have got, I'll just read the message. This is Z from Philly DSA. The Supreme Court has ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade, criminalizing abortion. There's even an anti-abortion constitutional amendment being considered in Pennsylvania. There may have been, they may have the courts, but we have the power of the people. Can you join us today, 6:30 p.m. at City Hall to rally for bans off our bodies and abortion on demand without apologies? That is today at 6:30 at the City Hall. And who's this one? Let's see. Oh, this is just freaking people want me to sign things, and that's different than an action. So
yeah, and people need to stay tuned and pay attention because there's going to be a lot of activism going on, especially like you just brought up the constitutional amendment for.
Oh, I seem to have lost Amy. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
My fault. I accidentally clicked something and Twitter appeared where you were. So you were just saying that there'll be lots of stuff that's coming up, including like this constitutional amendment and so on.
Yeah, people need to stay tuned and they need to pay attention to. I know that there's social media is a really great spot to get information for protests and stuff like that. And that's all the ones that I have. I know I'll be posting on my Twitter too, all of the protest times and the different events and stuff like that. So.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we hope to see some of you out there at one of these locations. It'd be great. Let us know where you're going. If you have more information about other events that come out, feel free to kind of hit either one of us up. Find us on our socials and make sure that you kind of and we'll kind of help tweet it out and kind of give some signal boost to that. So Amy, always awesome to have you as my co-pilot for these Fridays. And so I guess I won't see you for the next couple of weeks, but I'll see you online and then look forward to seeing you back on the flip side of vacay.
Yeah, right. It's always a pleasure to be here and enjoy that vacation.
I'm going to do my best and hopefully going to come back in a little bit of a better headspace that I'm in now. So
there you go.
In the meantime, everybody, hope to see you in the streets. Look for actions that are closest to you and don't let the time go by this weekend without making sure that you're showing up somewhere because we need everybody right now to put the pressure on. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Great to see you all. Remember, you can help support this show by heading over to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. This is Kevin sitting here once again with Amy Connect, and we will be back with you in a couple weeks. All right? Here we go, everybody. To the streets. You got to have it. It's a dark day, but we hold the power of the light, so let's get out there. See you, everybody.
Let me try my people call.